Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night, and believe me, there are a lot of very interesting updates. Most of those updates are connected not with the situation on the ground, not with the clashes and fierce fightings, but with the redeployments of Ukrainian forces, and believe me, the redeployments are significant. First of all, let's start with Petykhatki bridgehead. The Ukrainians during the previous days probably managed to or tried to reinforce the forces in that area after heavy losses for Battle of Petykhatki, which currently is in the gray zone. Anyway, the Ukrainians have redeployed the forces of 73rd Navy Center of Special Operations, and it's like something like intelligence battalion, and the purpose of that forces is, let's say, to cross Dnieper River, to capture Zaporozhye power plant, or to make some kind of special operations against authorities on the territory that is under Russian control. Another interesting thing is that according to the Western deployment map, the Ukrainians have redeployed in this area the 32nd Mechanized Battalion, but when talking about the Russians, yesterday we discussed that the Russians spotted the Russian forces in Kremenaya Forest, to be more precise, the Rybar, reported that the forces of 32nd Mechanized Brigade were spotted in the vicinity of Kremenaya Forest, and that there were clashes with that brigade, but probably that was some kind of disinformation, or at least the special operation from the Ukrainian side where they were trying to force the Russians to think like this. Anyway, according to the deployment map, the 32nd Mechanized Brigade was redeployed in direction of Gulyai-Polye, and currently this brigade is located somewhere in the vicinity of Gulyai-Polye, together with the 23rd Mechanized Brigade, 67th, 33rd, and 102nd Defense Brigade. As we discussed yesterday, currently the Ukrainians have already created a very powerful attack fist in the vicinity of Gulyai-Polye, in the area where the Ukrainians still haven't launched any offensive operation, just a small recos in combat, so we expect a very big activation of the Ukrainian forces exactly from this area in direction of Kamyanska. Furthermore, the Ukrainians took a decision to move closer the 74th Intelligence Battalion that was located in the vicinity of Chaplin, closer to the combat line, and currently, according to the deployment map, this 74th Intelligence Battalion is located somewhere between Livadnaya, Algovskaya, Livadnaya, and Novodanilovka in this area. Of course, they need to get closer to the combat line. The Ukrainians still haven't managed to capture or to cut this Ravnopol salient, and probably they need more forces and more intelligent forces to complete this operation. Now we're moving further, and currently we're going to talk a little bit about Marinka. If you remember, these days we discussed that the Russians started using new tactics when they were using the Shahid mobiles, and this is a perfect weapon against the Ukrainians' fortifications that lies along the forest lines. As a result of usage of that tactic, the Russians managed to capture a lot of powerful fortifications, and currently we can say that the Battle of Nova Mikhailovka has started. So the Ukrainians took, and I'll remind you that recently in the vicinity of Marinka, in this area, there were 35th Marine Brigade that recently have been redeployed in the vicinity of Velika Novoselovka. So the Ukrainians took a decision not to risk, and they regrouped and redeployed the 116th Defense Brigade that recently have been located in the vicinity of Avdiivka, and currently most of the forces were redeployed to Konstantinovka, Nova Mikhailovka, just to the fields where the Russians are trying to advance. I'm not sure that these forces are able to stop the Russians, but anyway, it's another barrier that the Russians need to penetrate and crack before they're able to encircle or to even capture Nova Mikhailovka. Now we are moving further. Just let me check if I not have forgot anything about this. Yes, okay, now let's move further. Now we are moving to Artyomovsk bridgehead, and one of the most interesting update we got exactly from this territory. We will pay more attention to this update in the last part of this video. And according to the Western deployment map, the Ukrainians have redeployed right together with the 113th Brigade in the vicinity of New York, the 104th Territory Defense Brigade. And the thing is that if we take a look, if you have access to the Western deployment map, you're gonna find this 104th Defense Brigade on the border with Belarus. And this is the most important update that we are going to discuss in the final part of this video. So the Ukrainians have redeployed 104th Brigade closer to New York, closer to the Stutarevsk, New York agglomeration. Basically, during the previous days, the Ukrainians 24th Mechanized Brigade supported the 5th Assault Brigade that were together. Those two brigades were attacking Klishchiivka fortifications, and during those clashes, the Ukrainians had a lot of losses. So basically, they need to replace or at least to reinforce the damaged 24th Mechanized Brigade, and the Ukrainians took a decision to do this using the forces of 104th Defense Brigade. Now we are moving further to the north, and the Ukrainians have made some kind of rotation in the vicinity of Solidar and Paraskoviivka. Recently, the Ukrainians activated their attacks in direction of Solidar from the line between Razdolovka and Veselaya in direction of Yakovlevka, Solidar, and they have made some changes on the ground. They moved 30th Mechanized Brigade to the north on that side of the river, and in the vicinity of Zeleznyanska, based on the Western deployment map, the Ukrainians have redeployed Special Operations Center West. This is some kind of special operation unit. As you can see, based on the latest update, we see that Ukrainians have redeployed closer to the combat line a lot of special forces, a lot of battalions that main job to make very bad things for the Russians. And this is very interesting. We expect a lot of interesting updates, a lot of interesting events during the next weeks. The summit in NATO is going to take place on the 10th of July, and the Ukrainians need to show something before the date. And not just something, they need to show a real result and significant media victory. I think that the Russians do have something to show to Ukrainians, but anyway, something big is going to happen. And finally, we are getting to Kremenaya Forest one more time. We see some kind of intensifying of fightings and clashes all over the front line, on Liman front line. The Ukrainians launched offensive operations, the Russians, and we discussed this area many times in recent videos. And according to the deployment map confirmed the redeployment of 42nd Mechanized Brigade closer to the forest line, and basically now we have 63rd Mechanized Brigade, 42nd Mechanized Brigade. These are brigades from the strategical reserves that are currently located in this area. Furthermore, newly deployed 2nd Battalion of 67th Mechanized Brigade. So a lot of fresh forces, and the main purpose of those forces to attack the Russians. And basically we see that this attack fist is one of the most powerful attack fist over the combat line on the territory of Ukraine. In comparison, it has the same value, power, and mighty as the attack fist that currently located in the vicinity of Orekhov or Bradley Square, and probably in the vicinity of Petykhatki. Very powerful. Obviously, either the Ukrainians are planning to attack, or the Ukrainians are planning just to defend themselves and not to allow the Russians to attack, to counter-attack, because we discussed many times the operation for Siversk, and anyway, sooner or later this operation should start. Another interesting update, and also very important, that the Ukrainians have redeployed to Kremenaya Forest another territory defense brigade, and one more time from the border with Belarus, 110th Defense Brigade was redeployed to Kremenaya Forest, and this is crazy update. And the thing is that one more time, the number of forces that currently are accumulated in the area of Kremenaya Forest Liman frontline is significant, up to 20,000 soldiers, probably somewhere there. Furthermore, the Russians reported, to be more precise, the Rybar reported that also 115th Mechanized Brigade was redeployed in the vicinity of Slaviansk. So there is like strategical reserves, there are a lot of forces. It's going to be very crazy battle in this area. And now let's talk what is so crazy about the new piece of news that the Ukrainians have redeployed 100th and 104th Brigade from the border with Belarus. And the thing is that there are two options. At least I have, maybe you have another opinion. The thing is that if the Ukrainians have redeployed forces from the border with Belarus, that means that they know for sure, for 100%, that neither the Russian forces of Russian Federation nor the forces of Belarus will attack the Ukrainians, let's call this from the north in this direction. This is the first thing. So they know for sure that they're not going to do this. But if I were Ukrainians, I wouldn't be so sure that the Russians are not going to use these benefits not to attack the Ukrainians in their back, and will not. The problem is, and as I understand, and there were a lot of talks about that on the NATO summit that are going to take place on the 10th of July, the NATO countries are going to give some guarantees to Ukraine, and the main physical realization of those guarantees would be the redeployment of some NATO forces not under NATO flag on the territory of Ukraine. So basically, as I understand, those redeployment means that Ukrainians currently have obligations, and the real piece of information that Poland, the Baltic states, probably Romania, who will redeploy their forces, some brigades on the western part of Ukraine, to be more precise, on the border with Belarus. At least if a few weeks ago I just I wasn't sure about that piece of information, but currently, because of this redeployment, because of release of such a big forces from this border, probably from the enemy's front line, now I'm currently sure for 99% that the NATO countries will redeploy their forces not under NATO flag even this summer, and this is going to be completely different story. And as we see, nobody is going to sign no peace agreement. The war is going to be intensified more and more and more. Now let's talk a little bit about the situation on the ground. Just few videos. The sources published the current situation, Kakhovka water reserve. As you can see, this area is completely dried and there are almost no water, and of course, as we discussed, this gives a lot of benefits and a lot of disadvantages. Depends on the period of time and the forces who is going to use this situation in their favor. Furthermore, the Russians published very interesting video somewhere from the combat line. They haven't provided us the real information where exactly did that happen. The Russians shown the video of T-90. It's like the most powerful tank in the world, according to the Russians, that were attacking the Ukrainian positions. And the Russians are saying that basically this tank got on minefield. He was attacked. He was demined at least a few times with the mines, but nothing have happened with this tank. So basically, it's a real tank. Furthermore, this tank, the same tank, was attacked by the Ukrainians' grenades and so on, and it managed to survive after 3 or 4 attacks, including mines and just the tank pods and so on. So very powerful weapon that can't be stopped by anything. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.